All right, welcome everyone to our 2021 Technology Outlook webinar. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Maddie Regis. I am the marketing coordinator for NetGain Technologies. And with me today are two of our most expert members of our team. So I'm gonna go ahead and let them introduce themselves. Haider, I'm gonna go ahead and flip it over to you first.
Hello, everybody. My name is Haider Alaban. I'm the Vice President of Operations here at NetGain. I have about 20 years of IT experience, ranging in a variety of roles, with most of my expertise being in cybersecurity. I have an undergrad from University of Michigan in computer science and an MBA from the University of Chicago.
Thanks so much, Haider. Thanks for joining us today. Scott?
Hello, everyone. My name is Scott Logan. I am the Director of Security for NetGain Technologies, and I have been with NetGain for over 12 years. I am a CISSP, and I provide security direction and understanding for NetGain as a MSP, and I also provide the same services for our clients.
All right, great. Thanks so much, gentlemen, for joining us today and sharing your expertise with us. So we're going to go ahead and jump into our content here. So our first section is all about technology infrastructure and just kind of business technology in general. And Haider is going to head that up. So I think something that everyone is very aware of is the kind of transition that businesses have had to make since the COVID-19 pandemic last year. A lot of businesses have had to work remotely and have continued to do so as the pandemic has continued. So I've got a poll here that I am going to launch, and I'd be curious to know from our audience, what percent of your employees are currently working from home. And Haider, while they're answering that poll, I just kind of want to get your outlook on what do you think remote work is going to look like for companies moving forward? How do you think this is going to alter the way that technology is used in business?
Yep. So I think that from what everybody is saying, this change is permanent. It's not something that is temporary, that we're going to go back to a world where everybody goes back into the office and your customers are going to see you in person again. So 1 in 5 executives are saying that everything is going to return to the way it was pre-pandemic. And exactly what it looks like is something that they're still trying to figure out. So as far as surveys go, over half of employees are saying that they want to be remote 3 days out of the week, while executives are saying, most of them are saying they want to be in the office at least 3 days a week. So that balance still hasn't been found. What we do know is the shift is going to be permanent because we've kind of been forced into it, and we've determined that either we can accept it or we can fight against it, and vast majority of businesses have already accepted it. So remote work in most people's eyes has been determined to be an overwhelming success. So the shift in positive attitudes towards remote work has changed. 83% of employers are saying that the shift has been successful, and it was just 73% 6 months ago. So that is a number that has been increasing, and we're finding that more and more people are finding that that shift to remote work is successful. So as far as what that balance looks like for you, that's really up to you as a business. But we do know that most employees are saying they want to work from home. Most employers want people to be in the office more. And we know that productivity has increased as well. So most employees now are saying that they're more productive than they were before the pandemic, and executives are agreeing with that as well. According to the surveys, over half of the executive surveys are saying that their employees are more productive versus where they were pre-pandemic. So that shift to home has also given you other benefits. So you can now access talent that you didn't get access to before. We're finding that some of the potential candidates for your businesses are now moving to other geographies. No longer are they going to certain hubs like San Francisco or New York that are really expensive. They're trying to save costs as well. So they're moving to the suburbs, they're moving to other cities because they know that employers are able to find employees that fit in and can do the job from geographies different from where they're used to. So that is an opportunity for you as a business to look for candidates, to look for talent in areas where you're not typically looking. It's not all rosy. There are some risks that come with that. So let's say you do find some talent in a city that is not where you're based out of. How are you going to train them? How are you going to build that collaboration? How are you going to build that culture? Those are all really important questions that need to be answered. And there are tools out there. There is technology developing that's trying to address that. What that technology, though, is an ever evolving field. So it's not something that has been stagnant. You'll see changes coming this year. You'll see changes coming next year because there is a gap there as far as collaboration and culture that technology is still trying to fill. It's still an evolving market in terms of the value that's being placed on technology. For example, Zoom. Everybody knows about Zoom now. 2-3 years ago, not many people have heard of Zoom. Zoom has increased over the past year 5-fold. And that increase is going to be permanent. It's not something stagnant. So you need to think about how the technology is changing and how you can leverage it in terms of the gaps that you're finding in your business model now. So things like communication, collaboration, coaching new employees, how do you manage stress, and how do you manage the culture in a remote work environment? You need to find the tools that can properly address those.
Absolutely. Scott, you have anything else to add from either a general or a security standpoint?
I totally agree with Hyder in the fact that I think a lot of businesses have seen a lot of reward in a work from home or a remote work atmosphere. So much so that I think this may become a more standard, a more normal practice for a lot of businesses. Businesses that are looking to possibly move away from larger office spaces, maybe take advantage of some green space that they can save in operational costs associated to running an office. A lot of value is being recognized in a work from home or work remote workforce. And I think this is going to be something that continues even after the pandemic possibly dies down and a request to work at the office becomes more of a factor. But there are security strategies in working remote, and a lot of businesses took advantage of the accessibility of work from remote with maybe not the amount of security necessary to continue to protect their assets, protect their information in a work from home or remote workforce type of atmosphere. So I think as this continues to roll out, the understanding of what security controls need to be practiced in this atmosphere needs to be exercised and strengthened to make sure that the data, the people, the assets remain protected.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a very important consideration to have, especially considering it looks like our audience, over half of them have at least 50 to 100% of their employees working from home. So, you know, all of you that are listening today, security considerations are important. Your business infrastructure is important. And with that, Hyder, you mentioned something along those lines related to collaboration. So, because of this increase in the level of remote work, you know, collaboration tools have become very important. How do you think organizations can properly leverage those to help with communication and culture and all those things that you were touching on before?
Right. So it's really going to be critical for small and medium businesses to invest properly, number one, in collaboration. And we're finding that as far as IT investments, small and medium businesses are, I think 58% are investing in collaboration because it's really critical to the continuity of the softer aspects of running a business. So that the collaboration software that is out there is changing, and it's going to continue to change. What you'll find now is going to be different from what is available 6 months from now and a year from now, because there's still those gaps that we're trying to fill. From the perspective of what's available now, there are tools out there that are a big platform for all the different aspects of your business, such as Microsoft Office 365. There are smaller tools you can get if you're missing the brainstorming piece, or you're missing the presentation or project management piece, the virtual project management piece. Those tools are available to you. Us internally, we use Office 365. That allows us to use the traditional tools like Excel and Word while still collaborating with Microsoft Teams. We can build teams on the fly, collaborate and share in real time in those teams, and have files in those teams just like you would have in SharePoint. So that has helped us in the collaboration aspect, and Microsoft is continuing to build out tools. Just in the past couple of weeks, I think they came out with a new tool called Microsoft Viva. It's a platform that works with Microsoft Teams, works with Office 365 to address all of those softer aspects of running a business. So your employees' well-being can be measured in terms of how much work are they putting in during business hours compared to after hours. How often are managers having one-on-one time with their team members? How much of your time is spent in meetings versus focus time, and how often are you being double booked? All those things can be measured, and this platform helps with that. So you can start to take a look at things like stress and coaching, and how are your team members learning on a virtual platform. What you need for your business really depends on what works well for you, like I said. So there are tools like Office 365 that can be an all-inclusive platform that works for you. You can have things like Confluence and Jira that are for document management. You can have Skype and Zoom for the collaboration. It really depends on what you're looking for. And I think there's really an opportunity there for you to advance your culture and advance the learning opportunities for your employees, because they are now expecting to engage remotely with the business and with the customers. Take advantage of that. So now offer learning tools for them, and offer these coaching tools that are online where they traditionally would not have focused on using those.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those are all some great softwares to mention and some great considerations. Scott, you have anything to add?
Well, Maddie, you know me, I'm going to talk to it from a security aspect. I think collaboration software is absolutely a necessity. I think it's challenging for a business to be able to cross and deal with different types of collaboration software, as Hyder mentioned. One vendor that you may work with may fire up Teams, one may fire up WebEx, one may fire up Zoom. So you have to be very experienced across multiple to deal with today's industries, to deal with vendors and appropriate different types of collaboration software. But I think it's important internally as a business to decide on one, to exercise one, make sure that all of your users are trained properly in how to effectively utilize those tools, and then also understand that out of the box, those collaboration software tools are not secure. They have to be properly set up so that they can provide the amount of security to that control as possible. And just have the understanding that it's not secure straight out of the box is important, and make sure that you properly exercise those controls and make that as strong as they can be.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that's the point we keep touching on. You got to just, always keep security in mind on top of everything else.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of moves me into digital transformation. So Hyder, I think this is a term that I've heard kind of thrown around somewhat recently. So I wanted to ask you, what do you think going digital is sort of going to look like for small to medium-sized businesses in 2021? Just from everything from infrastructure to how they run their business, all that kind of stuff. What's your perspective on that?
Sure, yeah, that investment in technology is really going to be critical for the continuity of your business and the future of your business. According to the research that's been done by McKinsey, technology has shifted forward 3 to 4 years. That means that if you are not staying on top of that 3 to 4 year shift that has happened in the past 1 year, you're now 3 to 4 years behind. So we're finding that most executives are either investing in technology to get a competitive advantage, or they're just trying to keep up with competitors. 68% are doing one or the other. So you need to make sure that you're paying attention to the technology changes and how your customers are engaging with you. And to just paint a picture of how different the mindset is now compared to where it was in 2017. 2017, 48% of executives were finding ways to reduce costs in technology. So the investment, the change in mindset towards investment has changed very significantly. You need to be thinking about how that affects you and affects your industry. So two most important things to pay attention to are how are you reaching your customers and how are you delivering the services to them. So the customer interactions, the way you interact with your customers has changed significantly. The shift, the jump towards digital has increased by 40% from 60, it's at 65% now compared to where it was pre-pandemic at 25%. So customers are now engaging with businesses in a remote way, and that might not be the same. You might not find that post-pandemic they're still going to be 65%, but it's definitely going to be higher than 25%. So there's a new channel there for engaging with your customers that needs to be addressed. And how you do that is different for every business. For us, for instance, we are shifting a lot of our investments in marketing towards the digital platform. We're using HubSpot now. We're using a more sophisticated platform that gives us more insight into how customers are engaging with us and getting patterns and finding ways to improve that funnel towards us. And what that looks like for your business is going to be different. What we're finding is that 63% of organizations are seeing a significant change in customer needs, and 62% are saying that change is going to stay there. So businesses are recognizing that there is a shift in how customers are engaging with you, and they believe that shift is here to stay. So it means different things for different industries. For example, in the banking finance industry, we're finding that a lot of our clients are utilizing interactive teller machines, ITMs, to still communicate with their clients from a kiosk so that you can have that engagement, that one-to-one experience, but still keep it remote, still have that social distancing. And from the healthcare perspective, remote patient monitoring and telehealth has really exploded. So it really depends on your industry, but pay attention to where the customers are going, where they feel like they want to engage with you. And it's not a bad thing that you're going to have to invest in technology in this shift to the cloud. You're going to find that you're going to reduce your costs because you'll have a lot more people working from home. You'll have a lot more people engaging with you remotely, so those travel costs are going to be reduced. The office space costs are going to be reduced, and really your service model might improve overall.
Yeah, absolutely. All good things to keep in mind. Scott, what do you have to add to that point?
Heider makes great points on digital transformation is the future for a lot of businesses. A lot of businesses are now considering moving to the cloud to be able to utilize this more effectively, whether it's a single jump to the cloud with an application, you're just moving an application to the cloud, like maybe you're just going to do email in the cloud with Office 365 as an example, or whether you're doing a complete lift and shift, you're picking up your on-prem infrastructure and you're moving it to a cloud infrastructure. These are new strategies that a lot of businesses are considering, and they're going to be very effective in being more available, not only to your user base, your client base, but just management base in all of keeping track of data, keeping track of access, keeping track of and doing all of your monitoring associated with cloud. This is a new transition that is going to be very effective for a lot of businesses. Just to put another security spin on it, as I always do, have to understand that if you stand up Office 365 in the cloud, it does not come secure out of the box. You have to make sure that it's properly secure to keep that information safe. That goes to stay with anything that you transition over into the cloud. Make sure that the securities are in place.
Yep, absolutely. And I'll just tell everyone in the audience, Scott will hit that point home for the rest of his life. So Scott, you actually kind of stole my next point right away from me. And Heider, you mentioned it a little bit too. You all mentioned cloud. I think that this is something at NetGain that we are seeing more and more of the shift to the cloud. And so Heider, most companies are moving some form of data or using some sort of service now into the cloud. So what do you think is going to be kind of the typical usage model for small to medium-sized businesses moving forward? And I've got a poll here about cloud usage as well. So if you all want to answer that while Heider gets going, we can see how everyone's leveraging it today.
Yeah, and that's more of a permanent shift as well. If you look at the numbers pre-pandemic, 20% of workloads had moved to the cloud. Now, the respondents to the survey that I'm looking at is over 75% of the workloads are expected to be in the cloud this year. So there's a huge shift towards the cloud. And that is not just for larger businesses, that's small and medium businesses as well. So from your perspective, thinking about how are you going to maintain that agility? How are you going to keep your employees engaged and get them access to the technology and tools that they need, and while also being able to interact with your customers remotely? So that shift is going to be permanent, and you're going to need tools, and you're going to need technology that can support that. And that's why cloud becomes critical. It gives your employees the ability to work from anywhere, engage with customers anywhere. It can reduce your costs because you're no longer having to service a server sitting in a closet somewhere that that requires redundancy, that requires people to look after it, and you're shifting to an environment that has a lot more resiliency and is able to meet your needs from wherever your employees or your customers are engaging with you. So those investments in the cloud, those investments in collaboration are really required to continue operating in the environment that we're in now. And we're finding that small and medium businesses are putting those investments in because of how important they are. 58%, like I said, are investing in collaboration. 47% are investing in the cloud, followed shortly by security, 45%. So those investments are definitely coming in because it's critical now to pay attention to those things. And we're finding that those technologies might be expensive to invest in. It doesn't mean that it's impossible. So 32% of small and medium businesses are saying that the budget is really tough to find for those investments. So they're shifting towards something as a service model. So you might not be able to build that in-house, but you can definitely purchase the services of somebody who has that sophistication, who has the robustness in the technology and can support the security aspect of it. And just to talk about the security aspect of it a little bit more, once the pandemic started in 2020, the hacking attempts, the security threats that are hitting small and medium businesses have increased dramatically. So just in the first 4 months of 2020, there was a 238% increase in attacks on financial institutions. There was a 600% increase in attacks on cloud servers. So the technology is definitely critical to continue working in the environment we're at now. Securing it is also going to be critical.
Definitely. Scott, you have anything to add?
Hi, you're stealing my security thunder. I'm telling you right now, a lot of businesses are starting to utilize cloud services to help improve their business, to help make their business more expandable. It all makes good sense. If you're going to, let's say, for example, go to an Office 365 platform, you're going to use a cloud email platform, put a multi-factor association principle in place to protect the access to that particular avenue, in this case, email. Don't let a single password be the only single step into your infrastructure to where compromise can take place. Add a second leg to that with multi-factor. That's just an example of one instances. But one of the things I really want to point out about cloud is that just a couple years ago, a lot of compliance, especially in finance and in healthcare, it just wasn't a good shift. Compliance kind of said no. They didn't like the idea of how vulnerable you may become. Those have been matured. Microsoft, AWS all have platforms now that are very secure, that compliance do align to and qualify for. So don't let that be a driving factor for your decision to move to the cloud. Just make sure that, once again, and I can't ever state enough, that the securities are in place to appropriate that shift.
Definitely. And you can see here, it looks like a lot of our audience has already moved to the cloud, or they're considering moving with a hybrid model. So I think that really aligns with all the points you all were discussing. And yeah, that's a good point to know about the more regulated industries and the fact that cloud is now an option for them. Mm-hmm. So we're going to go ahead and move on to our next section, which Scott will head up, which is our cybersecurity section, because obviously that is always something that's top of mind for anyone involved with business technology. And I think, you know, I feel like I hear this constantly, but the threat landscape is always changing. There's different ways that you can try and protect your business, different methods. Certainly there needs to be a variety of methods, and one of those is social awareness. So I am curious to know how often the members of the audience currently train their employees on social awareness. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that poll. And Scott, I would just be curious to know kind of your thoughts on the state of the cybersecurity landscape. You know, what, just given some of the recent events related to cybersecurity and just kind of moving forward, what are your thoughts on that?
Before I get into the breaches, and there have been several in 2021 that have been outstanding, but the understanding of user awareness, social awareness training appropriated to users is so important. They are the weakest link in your cybersecurity chain. It doesn't matter how strong your firewalls are, how effective your IDPS, your intrusion detection platforms are working. They are already inside your network, and if they make a mistake, they can cripple your network very quickly. And so it's so important to make sure that proper security understanding is expressed to your users, not only in the effort of what cyber breaches look like, what the email phishing attempts are look like, and how they can be effective towards the organization, but testing them and understanding that they recognize these red flags and that they're properly positioned to be protective for your organization and your data. But going to the breaches, not all of it comes and stems from the users. A large part of it does, but not all of it. Some of it executes through brute forcing through your perimeter. Some of it executes through supply chain attacks. And some of the most recent ones with FireEye and SolarWinds were examples of a supply chain attack. This is where a vendor, somebody that you've provided access into your infrastructure, is the portal for the breach, a portal for the maliciousness that can basically cripple your infrastructure very, very rapidly. FireEye's breach was a compromise of their red team tool sets, their exploitation tool sets that allow you to exercise and understand your vulnerabilities from your perimeter and actually test it, actually go through processes of verification of the exploitation. Those tool sets were actually used in relationship to the SolarWinds attack. And SolarWinds was a very long attack process that then elevated into the ability to affect a lot of businesses. SolarWinds attack executed a backdoor into one of their primary tool sets for supporting your internal network called Orion. And it went in under the test platforms. It got itself to a position where it's unrecognizable, and then got transitioned into their production environment, and then got distributed to a lot of businesses, a lot of Fortune 500 companies, a lot of federal government companies got infected by this breach through SolarWinds. It was very, very large and very, very troublesome for a lot of businesses, and a lot of troublesome for SolarWinds as well. But this is an effective attack, and we have to recognize that these supply chain attacks are real, and make sure that we exercise least privilege access to vendors, and make sure that they don't have open channels into our network, or that we're at least monitoring what happens in those particular instances. But keeping a good understanding of what's happening to your infrastructure through proper user training, proper perimeter control, proper supply chain understanding and awareness, those are all necessary controls and preventive against these styles of breaches.
Absolutely. Hyder, you want to add anything to Scott's discussion about the breaches and state of cybersecurity?
Yeah, just to put a couple of numbers around that. So employee negligence and malicious acts, they accounted for 2/3 of cyber breaches. So it's not a small avenue of attack. It's something that malicious actors are definitely going after. And even though they went after SolarWinds, which is a larger company, it doesn't mean that you'll find anonymity as a small business. So small and medium businesses are finding that 43% of cyber attacks are aimed at them. So everybody is getting hit. Everybody needs to protect themselves and educate their employees.
Yes, definitely. And I think I'm sure Scott will be happy to see the results of our poll. It looks like a lot of you are engaging continuous social awareness training, which is definitely a good thing to leverage within your security posture. It looks like some of you all are not doing it very frequently or not doing it at all. So we'll have contact information at the end. Feel free to reach out if you'd like to kind of discuss what that looks like and your overall security posture in general. But Scott, I think kind of jumping off of that and jumping off of the different ways you can protect your business, I'd be curious to know just sort of some of the different tools that you can use, that our audience members can learn about from you. And I know I'm going to start off and ask you about one specifically, which is MDR, Managed Detection and Response, because I know that's one that's becoming more popular. So I just, if you could just talk a little bit about that, explain to the audience what MDR is.
Sure. So managed detection and response is the ability to monitor what is happening within your infrastructure, but not only monitor it, but be able to be actionable against it. A level of automation needs to be appropriated to the recognition of vulnerability, and that's what this tool set does. If we break it down, MDR, manage, the M stands for manage, that's the ability to monitor exactly every single asset within your environment. A lot of the MDR platforms that are out there, you need to be understanding of this, deal with certain platforms. Maybe they only can to monitor Windows platforms, and they are blind to Linux or other platforms that operating systems that may exist with your infrastructure. Make sure that you understand that when you're going into an MDR platform of what all may I be blind to, because that's important to know that if I'm blind to things, I cannot be recognizing to the vulnerabilities that may exist from those assets and be responsive to them. So make sure that you understand that. The detection part of it is exactly that. I need to be able to make sure that I can recognize weaknesses from those assets. So when I'm deploying an MDR platform, I want to make sure that I'm looking at my servers and all the logs that are contained on them. I'm looking at my perimeter devices, my firewall, anything that can provide me a log to give me more understanding about what's happening network-wise on those devices are effective in my ability to be detective. And your endpoints, you want to make sure that you have the ability to put an agent out there on those endpoints that can also deliver the understanding of what's going on at those endpoints. And then the key, the big win part of MDR is the R, the response, something that is going to be actionable against a recognized vulnerability or a recognized weakness that may be existing on a particular asset. In the effort of an endpoint, I want to be able to contain it. I want to be able to take it offline so that it's no longer able to affect the rest of my network if something's recognized on those devices. And that's an effective MDR control. You get that response, you get that actionable item and that automation that I was talking about to be effective in removing the vulnerability or the weakness. Now, what isn't MDR? Well, EDR is not MDR. EDR lives directly at the endpoint and only at the endpoint. You don't get that umbrella of understanding of what's going out throughout the entire infrastructure. So keep in mind, there are differences in that. I want to quote Benjamin Franklin. A long time ago, he said, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And that's exactly what an MDR platform gives you. It gives you that prevention. It gives you that ability to find something before it becomes effective. Or if it is effective, I want to be able to react to it quickly and take it offline and remove it from being able to affect the rest of my infrastructure. That's a good MDR platform. You mentioned other tool sets that are out there. There are a lot of tool sets out there that can help improve your ability to be preventive. Going back to Benjamin Franklin, we're talking about things like SOC as a service. We're talking about multi-factor, as I mentioned earlier, talking about encryption. There's a lot of different platforms that we can utilize to help improve the strength of our protection and make it to where we can actually stop something before it can actually happen in my enterprise. That's being a proactive approach to it, or at least active. I want to at least be actively approaching something that's threatening my enterprise.
Yeah, and before I flip it over to Hyder, I'm just curious, do you think a solution like MDR would have helped to prevent or reduce the effects of some of the earlier big breaches that we discussed? Would that have been able to help those businesses at all?
Yeah, I don't know if it would have been preventive, but it definitely would have been alerting. It would have been able to provide an understanding of something had happened into my enterprise, maybe an elevation of privilege or some level of change in my infrastructure, and it could have raised that red flag and made me aware of it so that I could be preventive against it.
Absolutely. So, Hyder, you have anything to add to those points?
Yeah, just to put some more numbers around that. So if we're having that 43% of attacks are aimed at small businesses, only 14% are able to prepared to prevent those from happening. So according to some research I'm seeing, over half of small medium businesses have been affected already by some kind of a breach. So protecting yourselves, protecting your assets is really critical, and through MDR and really an all-inclusive view of your infrastructure and making sure that everything is secure as possible in all the different manners of being attacked. Having a strong password policy is no longer the key to cybersecurity success. You need to look at your infrastructure as a whole and see how all the different ways you can be attacked and paying attention to those. And it could be as simple as implementing something as something like multi-factor authentication. You have 80% of hacking related breaches caused by stolen or weak passwords. MFA really comes in handy to prevent something like
Definitely. So I think, Scott, do you have any other sort of thoughts on some of the preventive measures that businesses can take, or have we covered all of those aspects so far?
Well, I want to expand more on SOC as a service. A lot of businesses, especially smaller businesses, simply either can't afford a security professional on staff or simply can't find one to their region that's available to provide security understanding for their businesses. A lot of businesses, unfortunately, and this is, I see this a lot, that the IT guy is trying to wear that security hat, and that's unfortunate. It's unfortunate for him, it's unfortunate for the business, because they're normally not trained. They're not certified to be able to deliver that understanding. A security operations center or a SOC as a service program can help deliver security professionals to evaluate, to help exercise your control. In an MDR platform, having a SOC sitting behind the MDR, using security professionals to actually go through the information that the managed detection response system is looking for to actually execute a remediation control or actionable item by a security professional is more effective. It makes the program even stronger than just acting straight up as a SIM solution. So I just want to stress that security professionals are out there. They're available through SOC and service programs that can help elevate your security controls, your security practice for your business. You just got to take advantage of those types of businesses, those types of controls.
Absolutely. Hyder, anything to add about SOC as a service or just in general?
Yes, Scott's absolutely right. Like I said before, you can be attacked from all different avenues. So having someone who is an expert or a group of people who know how to look at your business holistically from a security perspective is really critical, because hackers are no longer just going after one avenue to get to you. They're using every method possible, and it's becoming easier and easier for them. There are very simple tools that you can download and that will look for all kinds of vulnerabilities in your network with one click of a button. So it's not something that takes a ton of effort from the hacker's perspective. Sometimes it's just a click of a button for them. And for you, you need to be paying attention to how do you secure your infrastructure.
For sure. So in that vein, I have another poll to launch with the audience. I'm curious to know what everyone's biggest cybersecurity challenges for their business at the moment. Excuse me. So while we are getting some feedback on that, Scott, I'd just kind of like to wrap up our security discussion with kind of what you see moving forward for 2021. So what do you think is going to become commonplace moving forward? I know you mentioned SOC as a service. I know that, for example, that is becoming sometimes a requirement for financial institutions. I'm curious if you're seeing anything in that same vein, or just kind of in general what you think is going to be commonplace for 2021.
Yeah, a lot. Compliance drives a lot of security requirement or security responsibility, and this is starting to become more of a factor for compliance to have a SIM or a SOC as a service type of program to be effectively monitoring what's happening in your infrastructure. You have to remember that every single asset in your infrastructure usually contains logs that can be monitored to understand what's happening on that asset, and having an effective control is something that compliance is starting to push more than I look at it whenever there's a breach, whenever there's a response. That's not an effective approach to as compliance sees it. They want to see a more proactive approach to that understanding. And so I see that. But one of the things on that poll chart that stuck out to me was the alignment to a framework. It's imperative in a compliance-driven organization that you have a framework in place to align your security. That's something that you can measure your security against to help understand if there's gaps existing in your security, or if there are security controls out there that are just not as mature as they need to be. And those frameworks can help do that, to make sure that you work with a company that can do an assessment against a framework and give you that level of understanding so that you know that your security controls are where they need to be. Once again, in definitely alignment with compliance, but even if you're not under compliance, still understanding where you're at in alignment with a strong framework, like one of the NIST controls that are out there, one of the NIST standards, 853 as an example, is a perfect alignment for utilizing where you're at in your security posturing and making sure that it's as strong as it needs to be.
Right, and clarify, NIST is what does that acronym stand for?
That's the National Institute of Standards and Technology.
Gotcha. Yeah, so that's a good one to follow. We've got some good standards. Yeah, so it looks like managed security, as we were talking about with MDR, is one of the biggest challenges. And like you talked about, having that security policy in place that's standard, so that there are processes in place. So it looks like that's some of the biggest challenges, along with compliance. So I don't think that's anything incredibly surprising. Haider, do you have anything to add on any of these challenges in the poll, or anything that Scott shared at the end there?
I just want to reinforce the importance of having a strong security around your business, because don't think about the investment that you'll have to put into security. Think about what happens if you do have a breach. We're finding that 60% of small businesses go out of business within 6 months of being victimized. It's not just the loss of data or the monetary damage. 85% are saying that it's the reputational damage that causes them the most damage overall. So think about it from the customer's perspective. They have all kinds of choices available to them. Are they going to go with somebody who is not able to protect their privacy?
It's very difficult to put a price tag on reputational damage.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, well, that concludes our content here. So I think we can go ahead and move into the Q&A portion. All right, let's take a look here. So it looks like we've got one question. What are the two main network vulnerabilities that you're seeing in businesses that haven't traditionally been remote, but have now switched to remote work because of the pandemic? So Scott, I'll throw that to you first, and then I'll throw it over to Haider.
So one more time on the question, as far as what's the difference between on-prem and work at home challenges?
I think, I think what they're asking is, what are some of the sort of newer vulnerabilities that you're seeing for businesses that were never remote before and are now very remote because of the pandemic?
Well, one of the things, and I think this goes to Haider's stat on the number of breach attempts that organizations face since the shift to work from home, is simply that the fact that a lot of home networks are not very secure. They can easily be penetrated. They can easily cause infection. If there's an open channel with your home network to your business's network, that like a VPN's established, then that is now a tunnel that the infection or the breach can now mature itself into your primary organization. I think that's an enormous challenge of work from home, is securing your home business. But I also think in a user awareness arena, when you're at home, you're more relaxed. You're not in the workplace. Your mindset may get distracted with home things, and you can make the mistake simply because you're not as focused when you're at work. And so I think that's a challenge as well, that you don't really deal with as much in the office as you do in a work from home.
Absolutely. Hyder, what do you have to add?
Yep, Scott's exactly right. So they're going after the cloud because businesses are shifting to the cloud more. They're going after these employees who are now working from home and connecting with a VPN. So they're going after these new avenues that really weren't there before.
Definitely. All right, let me take a look at our rest of our questions here. Hyder, I've got one for you. Somebody's asking, I think that with working remotely, and Scott touched on this a little bit of, maybe not having as many physical offices or things like that. They're wondering how can they reduce costs using remote work?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So there are a lot of ways. I mean, if you have employees working from home now, it means there are much less people in the office. So if you have less people in the office, your real estate costs go down. You can consolidate your offices into something smaller if you're going to have most of your employees working from home. Also things like the travel budget. You have employees who had to once go to customers in person and drive out there and meet them in person. That can be slashed. You don't have to pay for that anymore if your customers expect to engage with you remotely. You could, if you have to invest more in security, more in the cloud, you might have had some budget allocated towards server costs, physical server costs, or some equipment that had to be used in person where somebody has to push a button. Those budgets can now be allocated towards the cloud, that can be allocated towards security. So it's not a big cost sink. You can definitely save money, and we're finding that businesses are saving money.
Absolutely. Scott, anything to add to that?
No, he's right. The energy cost savings associated to not having to run out of the office, heating bills savings, those are all physical control savings, but it's true. And it's very effective to be able to work remote, not having to renew your physical hardware and be able to put it in the cloud and have the dependency of the 5.9 uptimes are all effective reasons to be able to make that transition. So I agree with Hyder.
Great. I think we've got one more question here, which is, Scott, you had talked about encryption before. So this person's asking, what are the different types of encryption that businesses should be considering using?
Well, there's all types of encryption tools that can be utilized, but there are two different types of encryption controls. The first one is for data in motion. And when you're talking about protecting data in motion, mostly you're talking about protecting email and applying an encryption platform to email that leaves your business. Outbound emails is an effective control. You have to remember that anything you send an email that is not encrypted is open text. So if there is an infusion of access, a man in the middle type of attack with an email platform, you want to make sure that it's protected for your business, especially if it carries sensitive information. And so a strong encryption control for data in motion is certainly important. And then you got your data at rest. And this mostly deals with traveling systems, especially in the compliance arena. You have to make sure that traveling systems are protected in case a laptop is stolen or lost, that you have the ability to make sure that the data that was contained on that particular asset was protected. And you can track that in your inventory so that if there is a breach of that nature, you can at least say, hey, that was under an encryption, it is protected, the data was not compromised, therefore you do not have to report it as a breach. That can be very effective for businesses that depend on traveling systems. So a lot of tool sets out there. Just make sure that whatever tool set that you utilize, like for example, Microsoft Windows 10 platform, put BitLocker in it. Windows 7 didn't have that. Windows 10 does. That's an effective encryption control, but make sure that you use a control that can track your keys for your encryption keys in case a user forgets their key for processing their encryption access. That you have some way of being able to reset it or be able to apply it. So keeping a centralized control of those keys is very important as well.
Hyder, anything to add about encryption?
I would just advise on paying attention to what encryption you have in place and how long it's been in place. If you've been using an encryption that's been sitting out there for 10 years, such as DES or triple DES, those have been cracked. They can be cracked within minutes now. So making sure you're using the latest encryption standards is going to be really important.
Yes,
Agreed.
that is an excellent point. Always good to stay current in the security realm. All right, well, gentlemen, I think I'm going to go ahead and have you all wrap up here. So Hyder, just your final thoughts, short, quick wrap up here on your outlook for 2021.
Yeah, I would say that we are in an exciting time. Things are changing. Things are going to become more permanent. The world of accessing your customers and figuring out what your business model is going to look like in 2021 is really, it's going to be permanent, and is something that you have to put a lot of thought into. Our businesses are finding that in Q2 is probably where you'll find things are starting to iron out and solidify. So pay attention to how your customers are engaging with you and how that shift is working for you. Because really your customers are the lifeblood of your business. So you need to make sure you're approaching with them and interacting with them in the way that you need to. And the service delivery model that you have, how your customers and your employees are engaging virtually. Just pay attention to that and making sure you're ahead of the curve instead of behind it.
Absolutely. Scott, your final wrap up thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of businesses have transitioned to remote workforce and work from home, and they're soon going to be going back to the office. And if that is the case, please make sure that you take the proper steps to secure your assets before you bring them back into your infrastructure. Make sure their AV, their antivirus, and their malware signatures are up to date. Make sure that their patches have been deployed. A lot of remote workforce lost the ability to get patches regularly. They failed to get them because they took them offline during the patch delivery sequencing, or they just did not have the bandwidth to be able to receive the patching. Make sure that those systems are up to date before you bring them into your network. And the last thing you need to do is make sure that you scan those equipments for any infection, any level of compromise that may have been introduced while it was work from home, while it was in a remote workforce atmosphere, before I bring it back into my primary infrastructure.
Absolutely. All good considerations to make. All right, well, that concludes our webinar. So thank you everyone in the audience for joining us. And thank you so much, Scott and Hyder, for sharing your expertise with us today. So everyone in the audience, contact us below if you have any other questions, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks.